Welcome to RankLens. Today, we count down the top 10 most unbelievable tech company origin stories. You know the story. Every tech billionaire started in a garage, right? But here's what keeps you up at night. Some of these origin stories are absolutely bonkers. One founder worked as a dishwasher at a diner, where he'd later founded a $5 trillion company. Another sold breakfast cereal for $40 a box. And one startup's entire business model came from a group chat inside a failed video game. This is the countdown of tech's most unbelievable origin stories. The ones so chaotic, so improbable, so absurdly humble, that the final payoff will absolutely blow your mind. At number 10, Amazon. And here's where our countdown gets interesting. Jeff Bezos didn't just start Amazon in a garage, he engineered the narrative. Bezos deliberately rented a house with a garage he didn't actually need, specifically so Amazon could later claim that iconic Silicon Valley garage startup origin story. It's the most meta way to invent a myth before the company even existed. He originally named the venture Cadabra, a magical reference that nobody could pronounce over the phone. So he switched to Amazon, inspired by the vast river, suggesting infinite selection and global reach. The startup began strictly as an online bookstore. No cloud services, no Alexa. No empire yet, just books delivered to your door. From a bookstore's side project to reshaping global commerce, Amazon earned this spot by pulling off one of the greatest origin story pivots in tech history. At number 9, Google. In 1998, two Stanford PhDs, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, met as graduate students and decided to revolutionize search. But first, they needed a garage. They rented one from Susan Wojcicki, a Stanford graduate who would later become the CEO of YouTube. What a reference point to have in your origin story. The workspace was so minimal, they worked at desks made from literal doors balanced on sawhorses. Their search engine had started as a research project, initially nicknamed Backrub. Page and Brin thought this name had better ring to it than what would eventually become Google. Somehow they were wrong. From door desks and rejected engine names to organizing the world's information, this is how Google's billion-dollar empire began in a single garage. At number 8, Microsoft. In 1975, Bill Gates and Paul Allen attempted something truly audacious. They wrote a basic interpreter for the Altair 8800, a computer they'd never actually touched. Not with their hands, not in person. They just believed they could do it. Gates and Allen relocated from Seattle to Albuquerque, New Mexico, specifically to be closer to MITS, the company that made the Altair. This wasn't Silicon Valley garage dreaming, this was a calculated move into the New Mexico desert. The gamble worked. Their interpreter ran on the first try. Gates, only 19 at the time, was so committed he dropped out of Harvard. His parents were thrilled, obviously. From bootstrap code for hardware they'd never seen to dominating the PC industry, Microsoft's origin story is pure teenage audacity. At number 7, Hewlett-Packard. In 1939, during the depths of the Great Depression, two engineers, Bill Hewlett and David Packard, had an insane idea: build something nobody needed yet. With just 538 to their name, they built audio oscillators in a small Palo Alto garage. These weren't flashy. They were precision instruments for a market that barely existed. Then Disney called. The Walt Disney Studios had a problem. Animating Fantasia required precise audio measurement equipment. Disney bought Hewlett and Packard's oscillators to help produce one of animation's greatest masterpieces. Before you knew it, the little garage in Palo Alto had launched an empire. How do you decide whose name comes first? Hewlett and Packard flipped a coin. That garage is now recognized as the birthplace of Silicon Valley itself. At number 6, Apple. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were broke, so they made the ultimate sacrifice. Jobs sold his Volkswagen van. Wozniak sold his prized HP calculator. Not his grandmother's China, but for a tech enthusiast, that was close enough. They also had a third co-founder, Ronald Wayne, who would ink the first Apple partnership agreement. But Wayne got cold feet. He sold his stake back for $800, then watched as the company exploded in value. That's the most expensive exit ever. The first Apple computers were hand-soldered in the Jobs family garage, one board at a time, every component placed by hand. No factory, no mass production. From sacrificed vehicles and hand-soldered circuits to revolutionizing personal computing, Apple's origin story is pure perseverance meets perfect timing. At number 5, Sony. Imagine starting a company in the rubble. In 1946, just months after Japan's surrender in World War II, engineer Masaru Ibuka and businessman Akio Morita founded their venture in a bomb-damaged department store in the heart of Tokyo. Not a garage, not a dorm room. A literal war zone being rebuilt. The company was originally called Tokyo Tsushin Kogyo Kabushiki Kaisha, a mouthful nobody outside Japan could possibly pronounce. So in 1958, they rebranded to Sony, inspired by the Latin word sonus, meaning sound, combined with American slang, sunny. It was a calculated bet that the world was ready for Japanese electronics. They were absolutely right. From a bombed-out department store to becoming a global electronics giant, Sony's origin story is about building from absolute nothing, because sometimes rubble is all you have left to build from. At number 4, Slack. This one's different because Slack wasn't founded as Slack at all. Stuart Butterfield ran an online game called Glitch, an MMO so destined to fail that even venture capitalists gave up on it. But the team built an internal chat tool to communicate while building Glitch. They talked about game design, bugs, features, everything inside this little chat room. When Glitch inevitably died, Butterfield realized the chat tool was the real product. So Slack was literally born from the ashes of failure. And this wasn't even Butterfield's first time doing this. He previously turned another failed game into Flickr, one of the internet's most iconic photo-sharing platforms. From a failed game side tool to becoming essential infrastructure for millions of workers worldwide, Slack's origin is proof that sometimes your backup plan is better than the main event. At number 3, Airbnb. The founders were broke. Seriously broke. Living in the same apartment in San Francisco, they needed money yesterday. So they did what any desperate founder would do. They bought cereal boxes, hand-glued them, and created limited edition boxes called Obama O's and Captain McCain's for $4 a box. They sold them for $40 apiece. It worked long enough to keep the lights on. While that hustle was happening, they started renting out air mattresses in their actual apartment, hence Airbnb. Not exactly the dream scenario. Multiple venture capitalists looked at this idea and said, no. Then Y Combinator, the startup incubator that bets on founders nobody else believes in, took a chance. From selling expensive cereal and renting air mattresses to reshaping global travel, Airbnb's origin is the story of pure hustle when all else fails. At number 2, WhatsApp. This one stings. Jan Koum arrived in the United States as an immigrant, and his family relied on food stamps to survive. They had nothing. Years later, when Koum had built something valuable, he applied to work at Facebook. Except Facebook said no. They rejected him for the job. Koum walked away and built WhatsApp instead, a messaging app so focused on simplicity and speed that it changed how billions communicate. Then Facebook came calling again, not for Koum's employment, but for his company. In 2014, they acquired WhatsApp for $19 billion, one of the largest tech acquisitions ever. But here's the part that gets you. Koum signed the acquisition papers outside the very same welfare office where his family once stood in line. A full-circle moment captured in one photograph. From food stamp kid to 19 billion founder, WhatsApp's origin is the ultimate immigrant underdog story, the one where rejection becomes fuel and resilience becomes a superpower. At number 1, Nvidia. 3 engineers, 1 diner booth, $200 in cash, and a 5 trillion company. This is it. In 1993, Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Priam met over coffee at a Denny's diner in East San Jose to plot the future of graphics computing. Just $200 to incorporate the company. Not 2,000 NZRI, not $2 million in VC funding. 200. And Jensen Huang? He'd worked as a busboy and dishwasher at that very Denny's as a teenager, serving customers in the same booth where he'd later founded a company now valued at $5 trillion. The booth where Nvidia was born is now marked with a commemorative plaque. From a diner booth to inventing the chips that power AI, from washing dishes for minimum wage to leading the semiconductor revolution, Nvidia's origin is the ultimate proof that the craziest ideas happen in the most ordinary places. And yes, they eventually moved out of the diner. These aren't just feel-good startup stories. They're a masterclass in the gap between where you start and where you end up. Desperation, timing, and irrational confidence. Some built from rubble. Some sold their possessions. Some were rejected by companies they'd later rival. The takeaway? These aren't anomalies. They're the rule. Building from nothing requires the kind of absolute conviction that only the desperate or the visionary possess. And sometimes, both. So the next time someone pitches a startup idea at your local diner, remember, that booth might just be the birthplace of the next trillion-dollar company. And that's the top 10 most unbelievable tech company origin stories. If you enjoyed this countdown, subscribe to RankLens for more.